Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are diving deep into one of the most sophisticated cyber attacks in history, the SolarWinds hack. But we're not just going to look at the code. We're going to tell the human story of the person right at the center of the storm, the company's Chief Information Security Officer, Tim Brown. It's a story of crisis, of responsibility, and, well, what happens when your own company gets turned into a weapon? I mean, really think about that for a second. Every single day, you and we click update on our phones, on our computers, without even thinking about it. We trust that it's making our stuff safer. But what if that simple everyday action was basically opening the front door and inviting a foreign intelligence service to walk right in? Because that is exactly what happened here. So this whole story, it doesn't kick off with some blaring system alert or a flashing red light. No, it starts with a quiet phone call. It's a Saturday morning in December 2020, and the head of the cybersecurity firm Mandiant is calling the CISO of SolarWinds, Tim Brown. And that one call set off a chain of events that would consume the company for years. The first question was just blunt. Is this real? Mandiant shared some decompiled code they'd found inside SolarWinds software, and the team, well, they pretty quickly confirmed the absolute worst. It was real. And that code was definitely not theirs. So by Sunday, remember the whole world is still working remotely because of COVID, the team sets up 2 physical war rooms at the office. And for the next 3 weeks, they basically lived there. The only day they took off was Christmas Day, just trying to unravel this thing. Okay, so here's the thing that's just wild about this. This wasn't your typical hack. The attackers didn't just break into a network. They broke into the factory itself. They figured out a way to slip their malicious code directly into the final, compiled product right as it was being built, a method that was pretty much unheard of at this kind of scale. So how in the world did they pull off an attack this sophisticated? Let's get into it and actually break down the anatomy of this perfect digital weapon. Because this right here is the absolute core of what makes it a supply chain attack. A supply chain attack is when the bad guys don't come for you directly. Nope. Instead, they attack one of your trusted suppliers, in this case, the software provider, SolarWinds. The goal isn't really to harm the supplier, it's to use them as a Trojan horse, right? A conduit to get to the real targets, all of their customers. Honestly, the elegance of this attack is kind of scary. The best way to think about it is like a car factory. The attackers didn't mess with the blueprints, they didn't steal any parts. No, instead, they placed this tiny hidden robot on the assembly line itself. And this little robot just waited and waited for one specific car part to come by. And when it did, in a fraction of a second, it swapped the real part with a compromised one. Then the car passes all its quality checks, gets its official seal of approval, and gets shipped to the dealership with a hidden flaw nobody even knows is there.
And that's what made the whole thing so incredibly deceptive. The developer's original source code, it was never touched. It stayed perfectly clean, perfectly secure. The attack happened after that stage, during the automated process where the code gets compiled, which means even if you went back and checked all the source code, you'd find absolutely nothing wrong. The poison was only in the final pill that was shipped out to customers.
So who was the ghost in this machine? Well, the U.S. government attributed the attack to the SVR, which is Russia's Foreign Intelligence Service. And look, these were not your typical smash-and-grab hackers. These guys were patient. They actually did a test run back in October. Then they came back in February with 3,000 lines of flawless, error-free code. And get this, after the malicious update was sent out, the code just sat there, dormant, for a full 14 days before it even tried to phone home. This was a methodical, incredibly well-run intelligence mission. Okay, so once they understood the attack, the focus had to shift, right? It went from forensics to just massive damage control. How do you possibly manage the fallout when your product has been used to compromise governments and giant corporations all over the globe? This was the number that hit the headlines and caused a complete global panic. 18,000 customers had downloaded the tainted update. This was the absolute worst-case scenario, the number that had to be reported immediately. And yeah, the one that created a massive, massive reputational crisis.
But, and this is a huge but, here's where the story gets a lot more nuanced. While 18,000 downloaded the update, the malware only successfully activated and connected back to the attackers in fewer than 100 of those customers. So why the huge difference? Well, for the attack to work, the infected machine needed a direct path to the internet. And a lot of companies had firewalls and other security setups that just blocked that from happening. Now, this doesn't excuse the breach, not at all, but it really clarifies the difference between potential exposure and actual targeted harm.
To regain trust, you can't just slap a patch on a hole. You have to basically reinvent the entire factory. And that is exactly what SolarWinds did. It took 400 engineers 6 months to create a whole new system. Now, every single piece of software is built 3 times, in 3 completely separate, isolated environments, and no single person has access to all 3. The results are all compared, and if they don't match down to the last bit, it doesn't ship, period. The result? A lone wolf attacker can't do this anymore. It would require collusion between multiple people, making it exponentially harder. So the technical crisis was over, but a whole new one was just beginning. The focus of regulators turned from the company to the individual. And for Tim Brown, the CISO, this fight became deeply, deeply personal. Just imagine this for a second. You're told you need your own lawyer to defend yourself in a federal investigation. Now, imagine the bill for that lawyer climbing past $1 million, your own personal bill. This is the new reality that a lot of security executives are facing. This quote, "It makes the abstract threat of regulatory action feel incredibly real and tangible." So the SEC ended up charging both the company and Tim Brown personally, accusing them of misrepresenting the company's security posture. I mean, this was a pretty unprecedented move against a CISO. But what's so critical here is that second row. The company stood by him completely. They paid all of his legal fees and supported him through the entire thing, which sent this incredibly powerful message about how a company should act in a crisis.
You know, in a conversation with his CEO, a really important distinction came up. The CEO believed Tim should be held accountable, not liable. And there's a huge difference. Accountability is about professional responsibility. You know, if you don't do your job well, you might get fired. Liability, that's legal blame, with potential fines or even jail time. The CEO's point was that a CISO can't be expected to single-handedly fight off an entire nation-state and then face legal ruin if they fail.
So after going through a historic breach, a massive rebuilding effort, and a very personal legal battle, what wisdom can you possibly share from the front lines? What are the hard-won lessons from all this?
This quote right here, it's such a powerful insight about crisis leadership. The skills you need to build up defenses and maintain systems during peacetime are just fundamentally different from the skills you need to lead when you're in an active crisis. It's not a personal failing. It's just recognizing that peacetime and wartime, they require different generals. And these lessons, really, they apply to almost any leader. First, know exactly what your job is and, just as important, what it isn't, and have it in writing. Second, the CISO's job is to provide the data, but it has to be the lawyers and the finance teams who legally define if an incident is material. That can't be on the CISO. Third, you gotta have that uncomfortable conversation about insurance and liability coverage before you need it. And finally, maybe the most important mindset shift of all. Assume you will be breached. Build your systems for resilience, to withstand an attack and limit the damage. Because just trying to prevent them, that's no longer enough. The SolarWinds story, at the end of the day, it forces all of us to deal with a really fundamental question about our modern world. Every single piece of software we use is built on top of other software, which is built on other software, creating this infinitely complex, interconnected supply chain. So as we close this explainer, I'll just leave you with this to think about. In a world of connected code, where does one company's responsibility end and another's begin?